Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Genova Burns, Terra CRG, Meridian Capital Group, Wyckoff Organization. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Goulston Development, Levine Builders, Eastern Union Funding, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Hersha Hospitality, Hodges Ward Elliott, Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
So how's the world look? People say the market is a little difficult. They don't know what land prices should be. There's a question of banks holding back on financing. What's the right market? So today I've assembled this next generation of real estate leaders, people who've got involved with this, some of them right after the recession, a little before the recession, in different times, to provide their insight on how they see the market today. My guests today include David Genova, a principal at Greenwood Development, Brian Cohen, a partner at Goulston and Storrs, Sam Schneider, the co-founder and the managing partner of Imperium Capital, and last but not least, from New Jersey, Michael Schonbraun, who is a managing director at Square Mile Capital Management. So I have two guys in their 30s and two guys in their 40s, correct? Mm. Right. You went into this business at the beginning of the recession. How do you see it today? We're in 2016.
Well, it's funny because I got into the real estate business in 2003. So before.
Right. I know you did, but I'm saying,
right.
But you started investing like 2000.
So we started investing in 2010. I think, it was obviously, looking back, a good time to start investing, but at the time, it was, a lot of people were scared because we had just come off of 2008 and 2009. Things now are very challenging, I think. Pricing has never been higher, especially for well-located, income-producing properties in gateway markets, and that's really where we focus, and we try and focus even in the best locations within the gateway market. So there's a lot of foreign capital that's chasing deals. There's a lot of all kinds of equity chasing the deals. So pricing, with the exception of condos and land, which is something that we don't really focus on, but for office buildings, for retail, for apartment buildings, in these markets, pricing's never been higher. And it's challenging to find deals to buy, but we're trying to be patient. There's always opportunities, select opportunities within those markets, and we're also trying to focus on smaller deals that are not deals being chased by large foreign capital. So that's what we're doing right now. But we're trying to be disciplined, and we're trying to be, we're trying to be smart, and we're trying to be patient. And when we do acquire properties, and we're pretty. Certain we're towards the end of a cycle. Who knows how much longer it goes, but we're trying to when we do purchase something, make sure we keep leverage low, and have upside in our leases, so we are able to weather a downturn.
You wear two hats. You're in the debt and you're in the equity. So how do you look at it? And you've been around quite a bit over the years. So how do you see the market today? Challenging, or is it good to be a lender, or is it good to be, is it good that fact that you have both sides of the coin too?
I think it depends on, because real estate's a local market, I think it really depends on the market and depends on the asset. And I think, certain assets are in need of more gap capital than others and are over leveraged. And I think that's a big difference from last time around. I don't think we're as over levered as we were. But we have this big wave of maturities coming up.
I mean, Sam is in New York and in Florida. David's in New Jersey. Brian's the counselor to everyone, so it's a different matter, which we'll get to him. But how many states are you in?
We kind of play on the coast and a little bit in the middle of the country.
Do you play in the Chicago market?
We play in Chicago. We will play in New York, as at least on the debt side. New Yorkers typically are more comfortable with leverage. So the lower leverage, we can only go so low on pricing on our debt side. But we do play in New York selectively. I just think it's a lot more of a competitive market than some of the other secondary markets that are out there. The gateway cities are a lot more competitive.
David?
Well, we're in New Jersey, a little bit different than the New York market. But I have a partner who, when I bring him deals and I look at things with him, he says, is this a bizarro land deal or is this a back to reality deal, a 2005, 2004, 2003 deal? Because people are building to terminal value. I mean, they're taking development projects, they're buying and they're building to what it'll be worth in 5 years, and none of us can quite understand how you go about doing that. We've tried to get creative and tried to do more redevelopments, different land structures, different capital stack structures, public-private partnerships, things that can create value in the ultimate product.
Explain to me and my audience, I understand, what's a public-to-private partnership that you've been working on?
Public-private partnership might be, we buy an asset that's near or adjacent to a public parking lot that might be ripe for redevelopment, might include structured parking, might include community use, and then we can work with the town to make our site larger by working with them on their site. So, major redevelopments within towns normally involve not just private land, but some public component to it.
Now, aren't you also involved with the theater development?
I am. I recently bought a large capacity concert venue called the Wellmont Theater in Montclair, which is part of what we hope to be a larger redevelopment and a community arts-based redevelopment.
So now I'm going to ask the lender over here, how do you look at an art center?
We haven't looked at any art centers.
No.
No.
What I'm saying is, it's a different concept. It's real estate, but it's a different market. It's different than retail. Okay, and I think in certain cities like Montclair, it has a need. There were redevelopments. Even today in Brooklyn, in the Loews Kings, which was a major redevelopment, but the city put in the money. It was $100 million to redevelop a community. Traditional lenders are not going to be out there to lend on that type of product.
I mean, I think you still look at it like you would most other assets, right? You need to look at what kind of cash flow it could throw off and what kind of credit support you have, and where you are versus replacement cost and alternative uses. I think that's probably how you would approach it.
When we were underwriting this, when we were looking at it, and we were looking with traditional lenders, it became real clear real fast that this was not a traditional asset. There's no evidence that tomorrow we'll have the same number of concerts we had today, or that the concerts tomorrow will be as successful as they were today.
In certain aspects, you could look at it in a form of a hotel.
It's an operating business.
Okay, it's an operating business.
Right.
It's a different type of business, and you don't know what concerts, what you're going to book, what the other competitors are, and so on. It's more of a community-oriented, even though both of you live in New Jersey, people still travel, but not that many people travel down to the Garden State Arts Center because it's a far trip. It's more geographically centered. Speaking of Garden State Arts Center, a guy who grew up very close to that, how do you're the counselor to everybody, you're the advisor, and people come to the great hope over here and say, What are you recommending? What are you saying to people? How do you look at the market?
Well, I think you have to look at it in two ways. One is taking a long-term view of the market. The long-term view, for example, the kinds of deals that are being underwritten, you have to think about how long you can hold on to that. Therefore, you want to have low leverage and you want to have generational assets at this point. If you see something that's maybe more short-term, that may create an opportunity to enter in at a different place in the capital stack. For example, coming in as preferred equity or mezz. Therefore, you're leaving the sponsor in a position where there's somewhat of a buffer. And in addition to that, it gives you an opportunity to be there, either A, to reap the benefits if it's successful, or B, to be part of the conversation if there's a problem with the asset.
But with regard to that, and something which has happened, and I wrote an article about it a couple of months ago, there are many established developer owners, as opposed to a square mile, who's been in the business of, I mean, you have a debt platform specifically. There are owners out there, especially some of the people who you are partners with, who have gone into the debt business because it's easier to put out debt as opposed to get the returns on equity.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, there's a lot of, especially developers and condo developers right now, looking for equity, and also coming, construction, running over budget and needing equity to complete their projects. So I think there's an opportunity for people who have to put money out or really want to put money out no matter what in any environment to come in there and give mezz or preferred equity to, and even high net worth owners who just have money sitting in the bank, earning 0% or earning 1%. To put that money to work, to go, get it a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more conservative part of the capital stack than being the sponsor, and able to earn significant returns on that money, and also being comfortable at that, at that level, if they ever had to own the asset and take the asset back.
You're in retail and you're in office and other markets over there, but you haven't really gone into development, residential development, or
Right.
specific ground-up development. You're really not into development, more as a lender.
Selectively in the debt side, right?
Okay, selectively on the debt side, but not in the equity side.
Very rarely.
And yourself, you're developing right now, or repositioning, I would say.
A combination of both.
Right. So what do you think in today's market is the most stable or easiest type of business to do when you're in the real estate business and you want to be basically conservative? And you want to stay in the, you don't want to leave the market, and you want to be conservative. And as I would say, as I always bring up with developers' DNA is I have to develop, I have to keep busy. So what are you trying to do today to keep busy and to be stable and not to make an error?
I think it's fairly simple and straightforward in my mind, which is try to build the thing that most people want to rent. So for us, I mean, outside of New York, where there's been a big condo market, New Jersey's on a rental real estate boom. And so for me, I'm trying to find locations and assets that I know people will want to live in regardless of what happens in the world, and that people will be able to afford to. So extremes on either side, ultra luxury or other extremes,
Which
I'm
is
trying to
what
avoid, and I'm trying to be in kind of main market.
Which is what Michael was saying earlier when we were in the green room. There's a lot of things happening in Harrison. People are
Right.
seeing certain things taking place in Harrison. That's in New Jersey. I know you don't. No, but that's one situation. What about, one of the emerging trends today in real estate, and I did a show a couple of weeks ago, I called it co-working, co-living, co-sharing. And I believe your partner is trying to do that.
He is. He's a partner in a co-working environment.
So what do you think? What's the general thought about, there's WeWorks was the biggest acquirer of lease space last year with like 2.7 million square feet. I didn't have WeWork on the show. I had a company called Industrious who has 22 locations. And then I had a guest from Common who is basically doing a We Live or a, renting a room, and he's a management company, as an idea. I said to him, there are many real estate developers that I know basically do it unintentionally, but they rent for an apartment and they put 4 different people into that. So any thoughts about that type of business today?
I think it's really what's happening in the future, especially we live, or those kind of concepts. As New York is just becoming more and more and more expensive and unaffordable, you're seeing, people, and they were doing this anyways, as you mentioned, rent a 2-bedroom apartment, cut it up into 4 or 5 different bedrooms. But
I mean, a number of your partners have been doing it for the last 20 years.
yes, yeah. I mean, there's most big residential landlords in the city build their apartments or rent their apartments, so they're the most efficient and can accommodate the most tenants per door. And I think that's kind of what concepts like We Live is an extension of, but it's going to have kind of amenities.
What about the WeWork, the office share?
It's doing great. We're kind of seeing in the tenants. We're doing a big office project in Soho, and we're seeing the kind of tenants who want to be there. They want the open kind of atmosphere on a larger scale, because they're not a bunch of different tenants. We're doing full floor tenants, but they're looking for the kind of hip industrial look, open full floor tenants, lofty kind of feel. And I think that's really the office space of the future for the kind of companies that's growing, the TAMI tenants.
Now, one of the guests I had on the show was from a company called Pivot Desk. And what he does is he goes to companies who have signed the lease for 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, who don't need that amount of space, and he basically is, as he calls, he's the dating broker of putting the tenant with the with.
It's funny you say that, because oftentimes when you're in a position, you're negotiating a lease for a tenant, you ask for the ability to have desk space. And this way, you can lease up to 15 or 20 or maybe sometimes 25% of that space. And it's really, a way to do 2 things. Number one, to lay off space without going through an arduous process of getting approvals and permissions from a landlord. The other thing that allows you to do is it allows you to incubate companies that relate to your company. But now with companies like that, they're seeing that in a lot of these leases in New York and other places, you have this 15 or 20% permission to do desk space, and it creates an opportunity for this sort of business.
I mean, he brought up the fact that Jamestown bought a building in Boston, and they purposely let him take 1 floor and do this subleasing situation because they wanted the floor leased in general, and they felt that this would be an advantage. As a equity of debt, how do you look at it?
That's interesting, because it's almost like a farm system for future tenants, right? You're sort of cultivating tenants that could be
You're also
permanent
creating
tenants
an
in your
exciting
building.
atmosphere.
Right,
in the building.
and you know what?
Yeah.
And the point of view of somebody saying, you want the space, you got to take 5,000 square feet. But I really don't need 5,000 square feet today. I really need maybe 2,000 square feet. So this way, you're helping that person. They have this 30-day clause, which I felt was a little dangerous because, somebody has to pick up and move. But would you lend on that, on a co-working type of deal?
I think we would, and we have. I don't know if we would do it if it was 100% of the building, but if for certain, absolutely.
Now, Sam, you have a lot of retail, and then you have the Apple Store in Soho. How do you see today, and this is for Sam and everyone else to chime in over here, how do we see the retail market? Okay, apparel retailing is really hurting a little bit in today's market. People are complaining about that. Banks are giving up space. TD was recently on my show. They said to me, the 15 years are up. We're not going to keep as big of spaces and our locations. We don't care to be on the corner anymore. We're trying to be more efficient. Citibank is selling 47 branches in the boroughs. And how do you see the retail world?
Retail, I think it's really becoming bifurcated in the sense that it's either an experience or it's not. And retail that's an experience, like Soho, for example, or other parts of the city where there's high street retail, the shoppers still want to leave and go there and go to restaurants and experience the whole the whole environment of the areas. Now, places that don't have that, even places in the city that are kind of just run-of-the-mill stores, that's really hurting. But I think that in places like Soho, rents might be peaking right now, but there's still incredible demand, and it's just incredible demand at a certain price point. So I think the future of retail is definitely going to be retail that provides an experience, and there's a lot of food concepts are taking places that used to be banks, and malls are being redone with food halls, and I think there's 6 or 7 food hall concepts that are currently being built in the city. So I think what you're seeing is just a combination of the shopping experience with the food experience, with making it a experience that someone wants to go out and have for a day, not just to go purchase one thing.
What about your retail in New Jersey? We were talking about it before.
Yeah, I agree with Sam a little bit. We have to do a good job of curating an experience where not only retailers want to be, but where people want to be. So if we start creating retail environments, now Montclair's a little special. It's a nighttime restaurant.
It's a nighttime, and it's also a college, university town.
Without as much of a relationship between the college and downtown as we all would like, but so we focus a lot of our retail on experiential and restaurants and hospitality because that is the general driver to our neighborhood. But a makeup store just opened, and their success has been largely around the fact that they have a spa attached to them. So they're not just selling makeup; they're doing facials, they're doing treatments, and that's how they're selling their makeup.
I mean, certain people. A couple of years ago, I did a show called Emerging Trends in Retail, and I had one of the senior executives from Equinox. And when I called them a gym, I was told we are not a gym; we are a way of life. But the idea is the number of gyms, the Planet Fitness, the Equinoxes, the Reed is coming in. They're moving into Joe Morning's building on 42nd Street. They're opening a 60,000 square foot gym, lifestyle center. How do you see that? Are any of your clients?
Well, a lot of clients outside New York who have retail centers outside New York are trying to create an experience within a outdoor shopping space or an outdoor main street to keep the shoppers in that area, and also to give all members of the family something to engage in. Some members may shop, the kids may want to engage in some sort of fun
What are we doing,
activity.
a Chuck E. Cheese?
I don't know if that still is popular, but a lot of those kinds of things. And then the other thing that I found, and it's similar to what Sam is involved in and also David, is there's all these new retail corridors that are popping up, like the areas in Miami that Sam and his partners have been investing in, like Montclair, Brooklyn, even Long Island City, or including Long Island City. There's a lot of great new areas.
Long Island City has all of this major residential development. What is lacking right now, but it will come, is they really don't have adequate retail.
It does feel very under-retailed.
It's Williamsburg a couple years ago.
Right, but Williamsburg had a little better infrastructure on retail stores. Long Island City, you have to take some of the industrial buildings and convert them. That's the situation. But with regard to that, where do you see, as young leaders, the opportunities in certain cities? Okay, we brought up Harrison in New Jersey over there. There was a discussion, I think you brought up Union City.
Mm-hmm.
You have something in Brooklyn. You learned.
Yeah, no, we're building an apartment building, a rental apartment building in Williamsburg on North 11th Street. We own 2 other buildings there and a building in Brooklyn Heights. So we love Brooklyn, and we've loved Brooklyn for years. And I think the good neighborhoods of Brooklyn, especially Northeast Brooklyn, has been, they're the modern suburbs, so is what I call them. And
What about Harlem and Inwood?
we don't focus up there as much, but if you going back to Brooklyn, rents in the good neighborhoods of Williamsburg, in the good parts of Williamsburg and Park Slope and Carroll Gardens and Cobble Hill, are sometimes beat rents in the city. And that's because I think it's much more family oriented in a lot of these places, not Williamsburg, but Cobble Hill and Park Slope.
Park Slope and Cobble Hill, there's no question.
But Upper Manhattan is a great place as well. There's a ton of investment and growth around all of the redevelopment of Columbia University. And also, if you'll notice, East Harlem is now developing and turning on Lexington and 100th and 101st. There's a whole new row of restaurants. things are turning and changing above 96th Street, both in East Harlem, but very clearly in Upper Manhattan, in the Washington Heights area, which is a wonderful place to invest.
Have you guys looked over there?
We've lent on some rent-stabilized apartments in Upper Manhattan.
With regard to the rent-stabilized apartments, people believe that the rents are reached all-time highs and there may not be much space to go. Any thoughts about that?
A lot of people are saying, how could rents go higher?
That's what I'm asking.
And a lot of people are saying if they stay the same,
Don't be the
you have to have
attorney,
a
I'm asking.
long-term outlook and a long-term view and keep your leverage low.
Yeah.
Because people are asking that very question.
We said
and
this
no one knows the
7-8
answer.
years ago too, right?
Yeah.
You just got to protect your downside and not project rents increasing at unrealistic expectations from here. And if you can make the deal work based, if there is a rent dip, on your projections, then you don't over leverage. It's it's a good deal.
How do you see lenders today, with the exception of David? With Michael, I'm not allowing you to get to the subject. How do you see the lending market? Are they open to deals, or are they being
The lenders that I'm dealing with, from the perspective of a borrower, once they're comfortable with the deal, they're engaged, they're locked in, and they are going to closing, which is not what I recall when the market was a lot more shaky back when we were sort of coming out of the recession. Once they've locked in and committed to a deal, in all of my experiences, there hasn't been changes in the deal, in the structure. They've committed to close. It's getting them to initially commit. But I think that the first 90 days of this year, people were a little uncertain. But now that the stock market's getting a little better, it's becoming a little bit more comfortable for the lenders.
So in summation, I think I don't have my. Oh, I do have my crystal apple over here. In summation, it's looking relatively shiny, but it's a little rough on some of the edges. So I have to keep it over there. But hopefully, the year will be good, and this potential recession is a long way from now. And I'd like to thank David, Brian, Sam, and Michael, and I'll see you next week.